And we are going to record this for everyone in case there's folks that weren't able to break away from their work. This is a lunch hour, so we understand people might be eating, but we do appreciate you being here today. And for those who aren't here, we'll have this recording available in a short time, day or two. Okay, I'm gonna get started, and as people come on board, they'll be able to catch up. Just want to welcome everybody for being here during their lunch hour. Um, we will get started. Our guest today is Dr. Carlos Richard, running for Multnomah County Commissioner, position 2. And we really thank you for taking the time today, Dr. Richard. We appreciate it. We are going to start. We're going to run about an hour. I'll be the moderator. My name is Mike Tierney, Program Manager, Advocacy for Impact Northwest. And this cafe is hosted by a number of Portland area nonprofits doing work in the community. And I want to give a special thank you to those who are with us. I'm going to name them: Portland Tenants United, Blanche House, SEI, Northwest Pilot Project, Path Home, Transition Projects, Our Just Future, Impact Northwest, William Temple House, and the Welcome Home Coalition. And we're grateful for this opportunity to talk to Dr. Richards. Through these Meet the Candidate sessions, we hope to engage multiple stakeholders, learning more about each candidate and their background and their vision for Multnomah County. And as a 501c3 nonprofit, we want to make note that we're not endorsing a candidate, but we do feel that civic engagement and advocating for communities that we work with and in is important. So with that, I want to just give you a quick background and some ground rules before we get started. One thing I want to make sure we understand is that we're treating ourselves and each other with respect. Biased, racist, homophobic, or other forms of hate will not be tolerated. As far as the microphones, we're going to have them off, and then during the Q&A period, we will unmute those who raise their hands in the reactions icon down below your screen, in your Zoom screen. So if you do have a question during Q&A, you can do it that way, raising your hand. We'll be able to unmute you. Also, we'll be using the chat function as well. If you have questions that you'd rather type in, we'll get to that as well. And then we are recording this event for those who can't, those who are unable to be here. They'll be able to access the recording today or tomorrow. So I think I've got all the ground rules done. And so, Dr. Richard, I'd like to give the floor to you to speak for, whatever you need, 20 minutes to talk about yourself and your background.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thanks to everyone that's on this call. I don't know if I'll need 20 minutes to talk about my background, but if I can, I'll use up all that 20 minutes. But I'm Dr. Carlos Richard. I am born and raised right here in Northeast Portland in District 2. I've lived in Portland all of my life. I started working right after college with the Department of Human Services as a support staff way back in 1997, some years ago. And from a support staff position, I transitioned to working for a very long time as a case manager. And after a tenure working as a case manager, conducting holistic family assessments and intakes for individuals, I transitioned into management for about maybe 7 or 8 years. And from the state of Oregon, I spent nearly 23 years with the state of Oregon. Again, determining eligibility for cash assistance, food stamps, medical, employment-related daycare, as well as domestic violence services. And then, of course, transitioning into managing those programs From the state of Oregon, I transitioned into Multnomah County in the Department of Community Justice. I worked there as a program manager for about 3 years, and I managed a very large team, admin team there at the Meade Building for DCJ, Department of Community Justice, um, in the adult probation and parole. From there, I went over to the United Way of the Columbia Willamette, and I worked as Director of Successful Families 2020, along with SEI, Latino Network, ERCO, Metropolitan Family Services, Latino Network, and NEA. We also did a very large collaboration with Reynolds School District and David Douglas School District, and the focus there was to close the achievement gap for ethnic and diverse students, as well as increase graduation rates for ethnic and diverse students. From United Way of Portland, I transitioned back to Multnomah County in my current position as an equity manager for the Department of County Human Services. So I direct all equity inclusion efforts there for nearly 1,000 staff with a $334 million budget. And I'm also a former commissioner and former chair for the Oregon Commission on Black Affairs. We did that work from 2008, I believe, until 2012. We had a wonderful partnership with the late former Commissioner Nick Smith, dealing with housing issues for immigrant and refugee communities. And we also did work around discrimination and racism in housing with the former Labor Commissioner, Brad Avakian. During my time at DHS, I also served in a liaison position under my former district manager, working with Catholic Charities and working with ICO, African Youth Community Organization. And we worked with a couple of other nonprofits as well, again, providing housing for immigrant and refugee communities who just came really brand new to the United States and landed here in Portland, Oregon. Very proud of my professional work history. Just very proud of the work that I've done with the community, trying to address these issues that impact such a wide range of individuals from all diverse backgrounds. So very, very proud of that work. I'll pause there. Anybody have any questions?
Well, one thing it might be good to do is we've got representatives from different nonprofit partners, and maybe if we could ask them to talk about what their pain points are currently that they're seeing with our current system, especially as it relates to the county and getting contracts done and getting their funds in a timely manner. So as I ask them to maybe get coordinated on how they want to express their thoughts on their pain points that they're seeing, maybe you could give us an overview of how you see the county currently doing their job with working in partnership with nonprofits, maybe particularly around the contracting part of it, getting the funds out more quickly. How are they currently doing, and how you think that you can see changes to be made?
Thank you so much for that question, Mike. Again, have a lot of experience working internally in government, a lot of experience working around budgets, and some experience working around contracts. I think the grade that I would more than likely give the county right now, maybe a C, C minus. And I say that because I think one of the messages I've been articulating as I've been on the campaign trail is around accountability. Okay. How is the county accountable to the partners who are on the front lines, who are on the vanguard doing the work? I will go sort of on the inside and say, on one hand, that there is some issues with contracting with respect to the whole process and the whole RFP process. I'm a part of a county group right now that is looking at very diverse ways in contracting on how to make contracting more equitable and how to make the process a lot more streamlined so that organizations are not waiting for very long periods of time before the money is actually dispersed. And I think that is a very, very problematic thing that has to be worked out. A lot of people call it red tape. A lot of people call it bureaucracy. One of the things I would do if elected, I would work with the current county chair to put program offers um, on the chair's plate for the chair to look at how we hire more staff when it comes to the contracting. When you have a limited number of staff working in that area and you have a lot of contracts to review, I would actually send a program offer to the desk of the chair, actually asking to hire more staff. The next thing I would do with the contracting process is I would look at what is the criteria that's being asked in the process when it comes to organizations engaging in this contract process. I just think when you have individuals on the front line that are doing the work, we should not make it more difficult to get the funding to the organizations that are doing the work. And I can tell you from an internal perspective, it is very, very difficult. And here's the reason why it's difficult, because it's so subjective from the individuals who are handling the contracts. We have to really sort of redact and omit the subjectivity out of the contracting process. And if an organization's mission, vision, values align with what the county's missions, visions, and values are with respect to housing individuals who are houseless, then we get the money and we don't put extra or additional stipulations on organizations who are doing the work. Finally, about the contracting, yes, I believe there should be accountability in contracting with individuals who are doing the work, but we cannot make it nearly impossible for organizations to reach their goals and not provide the funding for those organizations to reach those goals. So, again, there are ways internally that if I'm elected, I can work with the current county chair because I know that process. I understand the budgeting and understand also the need to get the money to the organizations who are doing the work. And then we would also look at some long-term strategic funding investments, right? So how can we look at, extending the life of a contract so that organizations are not always feeling like they are facing a deadline when it comes to renewing that money?
Right. Thanks for that, Dr. Richard. I have a question coming up from Transition Projects, Tony Bernal. I'll read it. Pain points for us. Number one, we're challenged by the contracting processes of local funders, particularly giving us enough funding to pay a living wage.
Yeah.
Number two, related workforce challenges because we cannot get people to apply for the positions that we have open that operate critical services that the county wants, such as shelter. Those are the pain points there. So sort of related to the contracts, but now also addressing the living wage for frontline workers at the nonprofits services.
When I was director of Successful Families 2020 with United Way, this was an issue that we encountered with respect to paying a living wage. And at that time, even it was with the former chair of Multnomah County, we were able to work with the county leadership at that particular time and ask for more money so that the workers on the front line who were providing direct services to students could actually get a raise. Now, this was happening when COVID was in place, and COVID impacted families, as we know, in a very, very difficult way. And a lot of people believe that because, kids were at home and parents didn't have to pay childcare, that all of a sudden parents had more money in their pockets and in their wallets. And we found out that wasn't true, because the money they didn't have to pay for daycare was the money they had to provide with, rather, to buy food. And increase cost in their home. So yes, I would definitely advocate. I would definitely support, again, helping organizations get the funding that they need and increase that funding so that individuals can have a livable wage. It's one thing for a person to love the job they do. It's another thing for the individual who love the job that they do to get paid a decent wage for doing that job. And so again, yes, I would advocate for that today, if elected, because I've advocated for it in the past and I've seen the benefit where individuals who actually get an increase in their wage stay in that position because they love that position. We have to put our frontline workers in a position where they don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs to make the ends meet. And we know a lot of frontline workers are currently facing that situation where they're taking more time away from their families, more time away from their kids' education, more time away from parent-teacher conferences just to keep food on the table and a roof over their head. So yes, I would definitely support, and I would strongly advocate that we increase the funding with our partners so that that funding can be a livable wage for individuals to live on. And what was the second question to that, Mike? The second piece to that?
Well, it was like the first. I'll read it again because it was a two-parter, and I think you covered the first part. The second one was related to workforce challenges because we can't get people to apply to the positions that we have open that operate critical services that the county wants, such as shelter. So I think they were related parts of the same question. Tony, do you think that we got the answer there? Okay. But related to that, the shelter piece of it, can I also ask a follow-up question, Dr. Richard, about your view on a housing first sort of approach to houselessness in our city versus shelter, and how you view that long, midterm, and short-term solutions, and how you view your philosophy on that part of it?
Thank you, Mike. I think my philosophy first starts and is mired in that this is a very complicated issue. I mean, I think we're in my estimation, right? We're dealing with the big three. We're dealing with individuals who are not housed. We're dealing with the same individuals who are experiencing mental health challenges, and in some part, the same individuals who are experiencing challenges with addiction. And you got this big three that's right in front of us. And I think that's the question, Mike, that most of us are trying to grapple with, and most of us are trying to understand which one of those big three do you deal with first. And so again, I know there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of movement around housing first. I'll go back to my days as a case manager when I was with the state of Oregon determining eligibility and conducting holistic family assessments for folks that came through our doors with the state of Oregon. The first thing we did was, again, that holistic family assessment. And in that assessment, one of the most important things, at least to me as a case manager at that time, was listening to the individuals and the families tell me what they believed they needed in the short term, what they needed in the midterm, and what they needed long term. And a lot of those answers over the years that I've been a case manager varied. Okay. Now, in my estimation as a case manager, I had some professional expertise, but at the end of the day, there was a lot of times where, according to my assessment, I believe the family needed this, but the family was telling me they needed that. So how I would approach this, Mike, and to the whole team, is I would approach it the same way. We have to let individuals decide what they need first. I personally believe, after being in government for nearly 27 years, that it's time for government to take a seat in the passenger side of the car and let the individual who is most impacted drive the car. And when government starts telling folks what they need first, for me, that becomes problematic because I've seen the negative impacts of that happening. The other stakeholder group that I think we should also allow in that driver's seat, more so than government, are the organizations in the community that are on the vanguard, that are on the front lines, actually doing the work with these individuals who will have way more contact with these folks than I will, even if I'm elected. So at the end of the day, how do we come to a place where we actually let the individuals and families who are most impacted by the issue sort of help us help them decide what they need first? So somebody who might be homeless, for an example, they might say, you know what, my problem really isn't homelessness. Although I'm homeless, they would say my problem is I can't get past this addiction, because maybe in this person's mind, the addiction is what's causing the homelessness. So again, for somebody who doesn't battle with addiction or battle with mental health challenges, again, their main issue might be that they need a job in order to stop being homeless. So again, we can say house first, housing first. We can say that, and I think it's a great concept. But at the end of the day, when we start to drill down, that would be my methodology, and that would be my philosophical approach. That's why I would advocate for more funding so we can have more individuals who engage with people who are homeless to determine what it is that they need first and foremost in their lives. The other thing I would do is I would have a tiered system set up. And again, this comes from my days as a case manager with the state of Oregon. We had what we call the intake unit. The intake unit did the initial assessment for that family, and they referred that family to any services that family might need, whether it's food, whether it's addiction, whether it's mental health, whether it's therapy. In that first 45 days, that case manager worked with that family and referred that family to services. If that family did not improve their situation in the first 45 days, it became my job to transition that case to an ongoing case manager who had even more expertise to work with this family on an ongoing basis, on a long-term basis, to help this family achieve whatever goals and success that they wanted to do. That's the approach that I would take. I would advocate for more funding so we can get more folks, because at the end of the day, if somebody is not ready to change, they're just not ready to change. But how do we keep the open door? Because one day that individual and their families might say, you know what? Enough is enough. And if we continue to engage with them and have the services in place, we can already know what's going on with an individual when they decide to come back. And again, we have our services, we have our structure in place to help families achieve their level of success.
Dr. Richard, can I ask about also the problem we're having with like available units that are also affordable, and how do we tackle that side of it? You've got you're in your examples. Part of that did include probably families that were ready to move and to their own dwelling and unit apartment, and it's just really just it's a rental escalation problem, monthly rental weight increases, and available housing units.
Thank you, Mike. I mean, that's a great question. 2 units were just built here in Northeast Portland, right off of Alberta, the Ronnie Herney building and the Paul Knowles building. And know Ronnie Herndon very well. Been knowing Mr. Herndon all my life, and of course been knowing Mr. Paul Knowles all my life. And that is the balance that I would bring if I'm elected to this position. A lot of individuals want to focus on resolving the homeless issue. I applaud them. I take my hat off to them. But the other side to that discussion is what you just raised, Mike, and for the whole team, is how do we provide affordable housing? We have to invest money, okay? If there are going to be unused monies from the Metro tax, we should take that money and build more affordable housing. We can take a portion of that and focus on homelessness. But if there's unanticipated funds rather that are going to come as a result of the Metro tax, we should take that money and find more places to build affordable housing. There are so many vacant buildings around the city. Real estate is not the issue. The issue is we have to provide real leadership, and we have to make decisions for those individuals and families who are ready to move into housing. And the quicker we do that, I think the better off that we're going to be. Also, I think we have to look at the third piece of that, which are families who are on the brink of becoming homeless because of affordability. They're currently in a space, they're currently in an apartment, they're currently in a home, but they are one paycheck away. They are one paycheck away from being homeless. So we have to really utilize the internal county departments, joint office. We have to include in there the Department of County Human Services. We have internal county departments who can continue rather to focus on providing rent assistance to keep people from becoming homeless. Okay. And so again, we have to do these things simultaneously. What I'm seeing right now out of county leadership is we come up with, county leadership comes up with plans. They put a name to that plan. And then when that plan doesn't work, they change the name and act like they're coming up with a new plan for homelessness, which they're really not. Okay. And so again, I'm not being critical because I'm not in the seat right now. But if I'm elected to that seat because of all of the experience I've had and I continue to have on the internal aspect of it, again, it's more than just renaming a plan, having a press conference, and say we're doing something new. There has to be accountability for the $650 million that was allotted for homelessness that only housed about 28 to 30 people. There has to be accountability for that. What I've been saying is that we need to hire, or this is what I would do if I'm elected. I would advocate to hire an outside third-party organization to come in and do a full-on assessment of the decision-making that happened with 650 million, roughly 30 people housed. We have to have somebody come in and give us some accountability, because at the end of the day, if we're only housing roughly 30 people, what are we doing with the other money? That's money that can go for affordable housing. That's more money and more additional funds that can be given for partnering or nonprofit organizations to internal county departments who can actually help people with rent assistance. So again, you know, there's a lot of work to do. And I'm not so sure that the leadership is in place to accomplish this work and get it done. And I would also add to that, because you got the fentanyl crisis, right? So there's a lot of things, you know, again, that's why I call it the big three. You got homelessness, you got drug addiction, you got, you know, mental health challenges. And so how do we sort of develop one strategic unified plan, engaging our community stakeholders and partners who are doing the work, as well as our internal county departments? How do we come up with some type of strategic unified plan that we can put in place to help us gain some success? Too many people are trying to solve the issue. Homelessness has been around since the earth has been living. We're never going to solve it, but I think we can put a big dent in it if we actually unify ourselves and come together. Now, you might say, Dr. Richard, what do you think the city and county are trying to do? I get what they're trying to do, but if you unify together and you barely come up with a mission for what you're doing, to me that means more money is going to administrative costs and salaries for people, and not enough attention is being paid to how we're actually fixing the problem. So I would call for a new unified strategic plan, working with government and community partners to help us at least try to make a dent in this issue, and then reevaluate after 2 or 3 years.
What do you think? I have a question coming in. I'm going to read it. It's from one of our advocacy members at Impact Northwest. Brenda says, do you feel the homeless response action plan, which was announced a few weeks ago, joint between the county and the city? So she says, do you feel the homeless response action plan is the unified plan that you advocate for, that you're talking about? Do you think this plan's different?
I don't think the plan is different. I think this plan is just same thing called by a different name. Okay, I don't think it. I don't think it's different. I think what happens here is when accountability is articulated, I think leadership gets nervous and they say, "Let's reinvent the wheel." Right? That's what I believe. Let's reinvent the wheel, right? Because individuals, are being held accountable. One of the things I would do, Brenda, is make sure that there are measurable goals, okay, and benchmarks. And I would also make for sure that there is regular follow-up, okay? And again, I'm not so sure that government can police itself. I'm not so sure of that. And I think that's part of the problem. When you have internal government data and research units trying to police themselves. And so again, what I think we have to do is remove the politics out of this. And we have to bring the humanity back to this issue that we're dealing with. This is not about politics. This is not about using this in a way to accelerate a political career. This is about an individual like myself who is from Northeast Portland, who has been around since the early 90s and 2000s when it wasn't fentanyl, it was crack cocaine. I've been around when it wasn't homelessness, but it was gang violence. I've seen the transitions. I've seen how this neighborhood in Northeast Portland has changed over time. And so again, when I say a strategic unified plan, I'm actually talking about a plan that has some realistic measurable goals. Okay, if we go back and look at the other plans, they've talked about things that they wanted to do. And right when it comes up to being held accountable for what those plans stated that they would do, they make one turn and they come up with a new plan, and it just isn't working. I think that in order for this to be done, Brenda, government can't lead it. I think we can be a sponsor. I think we can be a support. I think we can be an advocate. And I think we can use the resources we have in government. But I think this particular issue has to be led by the individuals on the front ground.
We had a question at another forum, but it leads right into what you were saying, and that is how, if that's the case, that it has to start with the service providers that are on the front lines. How does the commissioner and the county system empower these organizations? How do they regularly communicate with them effectively so they have a seat at the table to really impact what's happening and how it's being done? How do they get empowered?
Yeah, great question. I think in order to have a seat at the table, you got to be invited to the right table. Okay. And so what happens is we have a lot of community forums, and we say we're going on listening sessions and listening tours, and we want to get feedback. And then the next statement is we're going to take your feedback and we're going to make some decisions around the feedback that you have given. And then as soon as we as community members give our feedback and hear the plan, none or a very small portion of our feedback is actually included into that plan. Okay. So again, I think the right seat at the table that will lead to empowerment is getting individuals involved at the table where the decisions are made. Okay. And while everybody probably can't be at that table because we need a very big table, I think what we can do is form some coalitions with our community stakeholders so that they could be at that decision-making table to represent the coalition of stakeholders who are involved in this issue. We have to give people the right seat at the right table. I think we have to look at what equity really means in this situation. Okay, a lot on this campaign, I'm not hearing a lot about equity, and this is something that I've been doing my best to raise. And when we talk about equity, of course, we're not talking about fairness, right? We're talking about giving individuals what they need in order to be successful. We're talking about homelessness, and we're talking about how to empower. But at the end of the day, how are we representing, or how are we also empowering ethnic and diverse stakeholders in this process so that we can ensure that individuals get what they need, not what we want them to have. And so, again, I think when you look at this, we have to look at it from a couple of different ways. One, who are the groups that are most impacted by the decisions, right? Ethnic and diverse communities, those who are most marginalized, those who are on the bottom scale of the socioeconomic ladder, if you will, right? So the question becomes, how are we centering the voices of those who are most impacted? How are we centering the voices of those who are on the front lines working day in and day out with those who are most impacted? The other thing I think we need to do is when it comes to making decisions around funding and money, okay? A lot of times, again, government makes that decision, right? This takes us right back to the contracting process. You submit a RFP, you submit an application for funding, and you know nothing and you hear nothing until the decision is made. And that's either yes, you'll get funding, or no, you didn't get it. And then we'll give you a number or an email so you can call us for feedback to find out why you didn't get it. So at the end of the day, I would actually call for, and I would advocate for, with the current chair, who's going to be there for 2 more years at least, I would advocate with the current chair that when it comes to the funding and how the money will be spent, I would actually like to bring individuals to the table internally to have these discussions. Now, I understand the demarcation and separation of duties. I get it's the job of the chair. It's the job, of the commissioners to give feedback. But I think there has to be a way where if we, for example, if we have $650 million, we do more than have listening sessions, but we get the individuals at that table who have the experience and have the expertise, who can tell us what services are actually needed, because they're on the front lines every day with those who are most impacted by these issues that we continuously face in our community.
I have another question coming in from Brenda. Does the action item develop an outreach and engagement strategy work group and steering committee similar to the community sheltering strategy required in the HRAP? I think this is actually, I haven't finished. Maybe I'm not getting the full question. Let me just give me a second here. To get it coordinated in my head so I can read it correctly.
Yeah, I think Mike Brenda's getting that is because she put down there, I'm looking for community engagement. And I do think also, just to address the team and Brenda as well, I do believe, that we need an outreach strategy. Okay. Now, but the question becomes, who would be the individuals or the entity that developed an outreach strategy? And again, I think that comes from the community. I don't think that comes from government. I think what we can do in government is the work that we're currently doing through our departments, and with those department directors, with those deputy directors and senior managers of those programs, they can definitely come up with some outreach strategies, like the health department, right? The health department with behavioral health, man, they have people going out into the community, connecting with people who are having mental health challenges. I think we do the same thing with homelessness, but because we're already doing that, but I think we have to scale it up. We don't nearly have the number of outreach workers compared to the number of people who are actually living on the street. So it's happening. What I'm asking for is, how do we scale that up? How do we scale it up? Even in my own community, I had some folks who were outside of my business, and I would call the county, I would call the city, I would call the police and say, hey, someone needs to come out here and offer these group of individuals some services. Well, they told me it'd be 4 weeks, and 4 weeks. And that's when I begin to really understand, right, from an external level, okay, why we need to scale this up and have more outreach workers. Okay. It is a must in order to do that. I mean, we can have a outreach and community initiative. We can have that, but how do we look at the current data to determine the funding need? And I think what's happening is we're not looking at the current data. We're just calling something, and we're putting a little bit of services to it, but we're not coming back and reviewing the data to determine the effectiveness of it and what do we need to do in order to move the needle on the particular issues. So again, that's what I'm calling for, is we have to now scale it up, because it's not getting any better, it's getting worse. You know, one of the things I faced when I was with the state of Oregon is we would do a caseload balance, and we would do a caseload count and a caseload balance. So at one time, Brenda, I had 232 cases as a self-sufficiency case manager. That was a lot of cases. And it just wasn't the individual cases. You count the families. So I had 232 cases, but I had 600 families that I actually absolutely had to serve. And that's a lot. So we would come every quarter and we would do a caseload rebalance, and we would do a caseload count and then a caseload reset. And then we would balance cases and transfer cases off from one person to the next, so that we had more space and we had more time to do the work we need to do. I think that's what needs to happen now with the county and with the city as well. I think we need to take a step back. We need to level set, and we need to really analyze the data to determine what our next steps should be. Not because the news reported something happening in downtown Portland. That should not be our barometer. Our barometer for next steps should be looking at the data, getting with our community partners, and then together determining what are the next steps in terms of what we need to do to continue to help vulnerable citizens in our community.
You have such a breadth of experience, with your social services background, both with the state and the county. And I was wondering if you'd like to share with us some things that did work that maybe are maybe they're still being operated on, or maybe they fell by the wayside, but like some things that did work that you want to recognize and maybe expand with your experience on the front lines, that you can apply as a commissioner.
I also worked as a child welfare caseworker. That was my first job before transitioning over to self-sufficiency. I spent about 18 months as a child welfare caseworker. And again, one of the things that really struck me coming directly from college, working at-risk youth nonprofits and coming to the state of Oregon, was we had specialties. Okay. And so when I started with child welfare, there was specialty and specificity with respect to where a particular case was. For example, I started in protective services. And again, protective services, you went out, you did an assessment, you determined whether or not there was abuse and or neglect. If there was, you would hold that case. You would look at some services for the family. And then after a certain amount of time, if that family and those parents got the services that they needed and things improved, you would, leave the kid in the home, and then you would close the case out. However, in a lot of cases, that was not so, where you just couldn't close the case because there were some extenuating circumstances. You'd move from protective services to an ongoing unit. Okay. And that ongoing unit, the responsibility there was to provide some really intense services, because the goal in child welfare, family reunification. We also had a specialty with teens. And a lot on this campaign trail, we haven't even really talked about homelessness, drug addiction, and mental health challenges among our teens. But we actually had a teen unit there in child welfare. And then from the ongoing, if the family was not able to be reunified back together, we had a permanency unit. And I worked in the permanency unit. And the goal, when the case came to permanency, we were still working with family reunification. However, if reunification was not possible, it became my job to look for permanent house for children to be at. And then finally, there was an adoptions unit. I also worked in the adoptions unit, which my goal on the very back end was to finalize an adoption, give children a permanent home, and then if everything worked out, then I could let go of that case. What I'm seeing now is we don't have enough specialty and specificity. Okay. And this is what I would advocate just in terms of my background. We actually need to get some specificity. So it's not just encountering through outreach somebody that is homeless. But if somebody who is homeless says that I have these other issues that I want to deal with, how do we develop what we call the old school multidisciplinary teams that actually work together in congruence to provide services from a specified place? So you got one person that's dealing with the homelessness. You got another person that's dealing with the addiction, another person dealing with mental health, another person dealing with that. So again, that's sort of the vision that I would bring. Sometimes I think we're trying to put all this on one particular entity or one particular organization. And yes, I am very aware that a lot of our community partners have some of the specificities that I mentioned that are embedded in the structure of their program. But we need to scale it up. Where it's not happening, we need that to happen. And where it can happen more, we need to provide the funding to scale it up. I can tell you, very difficult to work with a family throughout the lifespan of every challenge they have. But when you have a team of people that are there, that is exactly in terms of my experience, is what I would advocate for. And I would really advocate for that because we need to scale up what we do. And I keep using that word scale up, and I'm using that word very intentionally because, again, we have to provide the level of service equal to the level of need.
Thanks, Dr. Richard. I think we have time for one more question, and this is from Tony at Transition Projects. Thank you for joining us today. Unaddressed mental health needs are heavily impacting our work in homeless services, and local measures such as the Metro Supportive Housing Services were not designed to fund mental health services. Resources such as inpatient treatment for mental health are in very short supply. How do we begin to tackle this unaddressed need?
Thank you, Tony, for the question. I would actually advocate with the chair and for the chair to look at the Multnomah County Health Department. I would start there first. I would say let's look at the Multnomah County Health Department, and one, we identify the unaddressed need because it's unaddressed and underaddressed, right? I think it's both of those. And so I would look at the current structure of behavioral health in Multnomah County. Then I would also actually reach out to the current governor, Governor Kotek, and I would look at what's happening with OHA in terms of how they're addressing the behavioral needs. And then I would look at those two government entities. And then I would look at some type of initiative or program or project for how we reach out to private practice, okay, and include some individuals in private practice. And I know we'd have to do some things just in terms of structure, but I would love to reach out to people who are in private practice. I would love to reach out to the organization BetterHelp, right? I would love to reach out to BetterHelp. I would also go right up on that hill to OHSU as well. And I would really start to have these discussions to say, how can we expand services to individuals who are being challenged with mental health issues, who are also homeless at the same time. And so, yeah, that's what I would do. And then, I would actually, try to partner with colleges like Portland State with their social work program, University of Portland, University of Oregon, Oregon State. I would partner with these colleges and to see what we could do with internships or paid internships, not just volunteer and interning, but paid internships with these individuals. So let's say somebody has their MSW, but they're also seeking their LCSW. Well, somebody with an MSW can help us provide that service. And so to keep this just with government and a few providers, not necessarily, I don't think that's effective. The other piece I would say to that, Tony, is again, when we're looking at organizations who are on the ground dealing with homelessness and engaging in that process, how do we begin with organizations to set up more expanded mental health services within those organizations, especially if their primary goal is to help people get housed, but we got this other issue over here that's underaddressed and unaddressed. Is there a way we can take one or two organizations and pilot with funding, and with county funding, with state funding, with federal funding, if we will, right? To say, what would it look like to take an organization whose primary goal is to deal with homelessness and houselessness? What would it look like if we expanded their capability to provide mental health services to these individuals who are homeless? I would love to advocate for that if elected as a pilot project, and then come back and analyze it and see if this is sort of a model that we want to do. I suspect some organizations do have maybe one or two people, but we need to expand that. Again, we have to scale it up to the level of need. So, Tony, that's something that I would definitely advocate for if I'm elected to this position.
Well, we're getting ready to wrap up, and I wanted to thank everybody for their questions and engagement. And Dr. Richard, I wanted to see if you wanted to take a moment for any final remarks as we close it out.
Thank you so much. It was fun. It was a pleasure being here today. Ada, you were right. This was a very welcoming group. I had no other expectations that they would not be. I just appreciate being in this space with everybody. And again, I am from Northeast Portland. I'm not a transplant. I'm not somebody who moved here, 15 years ago. No shade against people who are transplants or people who have moved here. Definitely not. But I'm from here. I like to tell people I am the community. I grew up on Northeast 24th in Alberta. Currently, right now, I live in the home that my great grandmother and grandfather bought in 1944 when they came here from Mississippi. They bought this house for $8,000. If both of them were alive to see the value today, they would actually kick me out and take their house back. But again, I'm right here, Northeast Portland. Again, I've been a student of this community. I've been an observer of this community. And the reason why I'm running is because youth and families need a voice. We can, again, I know most of the candidates, including myself, we talk about homelessness, we talk about addiction services, but really also youth and families need a voice. We got a lot of working families who live in Multnomah County, and they need a voice. They need an advocate too. My dad was in the Air Force. I had two brothers who were in the Army. Our veterans continue to need a voice. They continue to need advocacy. And again, as well as dealing with homelessness and other issues, affordable housing, as we talked about today, is something that is very important. So again, I'm running because I think I'm the candidate who has not just lived experience, but I have the government experience to actually be effective in that seat in District 2. And again, I understand how the budget works. I understand what a program offer is. And I understand the power of submitting program offers to the chair for the chair's consideration to help the families and the youth, to help those in District 2 who are experiencing some very arduous things at this particular time. So again, that's why I'm running, because we have to bring this back home. We have to bring it back home. We got our immigrant and refugee community that again, some good work has been done, but what is the long-term plan? So again, that's why I'm running, because I can be the most effective individual in that seat, not just until 2026, but from 2026 until 2030. I can be that person that will provide the advocacy and provide the representation necessary. And finally, I would say, Again, I know how the county works. Again, I understand the structure and the infrastructure of the county government. Okay. And again, what we need is not someone who is critical of what's not working. We need someone who can understand what's not working, but also understand how to provide solutions. Okay. Again, I've heard people say that it's broken. Well, if it's broken, nobody would get services. So we might have some hiccups, but it's not broken. Okay. If you got a broke leg, you can't walk on that leg, right? Now, I think the county has a sprained ankle where we're continuing to walk and limp. And I think all we got to do is get an ace bandage and some ice around that thing, maybe put a boot on it. But at the end of the day, I believe that the county has the potential. We're going to have some new individuals on that county commission. And I think it's just this is the right time to bring in new, fresh ideas as well as people who have an internal eye, but also have an expansive reach to help resolve and to help put a dent in some of the issues that we're facing today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that closing remark, Dr. Richard. I appreciate it. And thanks for everyone joining us today during your lunch hour. We're so glad to be able to hear more about your positions and your solutions and your ideas. And then again, we'll have this recording available for those who couldn't make it. Please let your networks know.
Yeah.
And thanks a lot and have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you too. All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.